welcome to this episode of Relationship Foods. I am so excited as always to have my special guest of the week, and this week we have Barbara, who is an occupational therapist. And one of the reasons that we're doing this episode is because this show is designed to build community through food, and that means delving deep and thinking about the ways that food is connected to every aspect of life. And a conversation that people don't always have is the connection between food and children with special needs. There are so many different topics within that larger topic, and so I'm so excited to delve deep into it with Barbara, who has all the expertise and the knowledge to talk about the challenges, the food challenges that children with special needs and their families often face. But before we get into that, I want to welcome you to the show. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. For those who don't know, just talk a little bit about who you are, where you're from, what you do, just a little introduction for the people.
Sure. My name is Barbara, and I'm an occupational therapist. I work in a school setting, and the majority of my caseload are children with autism. And a lot of children with autism, more than 50%, have a lot of difficulties with food.
Okay. And just like thinking, like, what inspired you to become an occupational therapist?
Well, I really enjoy working with people and helping people and making their lives the best they can be.
And you feel like occupational therapist is a good career?
Absolutely.
To do that. Okay.
Gives meaning. The whole purpose of our job is to make people's lives more meaningful.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. So before we get into, one more question before we get into the topic of the day is, I ask a question like this for every guest who comes on Relationship Foods, but what is your relationship to food personally? It doesn't have to be as an OT, but just as a person in the world, like, how does food connect to you?
Okay, well, I love nutritious food.
Okay.
I love to eat.
Okay.
And I also like to grow my own herbs
really?
and fruits and vegetables.
Yeah.
And I think that food is a big part of the rituals of life.
Yeah.
I like the social aspect of eating, and I like the fact that you use food to celebrate life's momentous occasions, the holidays, the celebrations.
Yes,
I don't like to eat alone very much.
Yeah, it's a social thing for you.
Yeah, I really enjoy eating with other people.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And so one of the first questions, because when we're talking about food as a social thing, and children with special needs, they can have a lot of social challenges and issues, and so it makes sense, I think, to me to talk about food in relation to children with special needs, because it's not something that people often think about, but food is a social thing. And so when there are food challenges with children with special needs, it affects other aspects of their lives, I imagine.
Absolutely.
So I would just one of the things I want to talk to you about first is, so what is the relationship between food and kids with special needs, particularly autism? Just talk a little bit about the common food challenges that kids with special needs tend to face.
With autism, the problems can be many faceted. It can be a medical problem with swallowing or a developmental problem. They haven't developed the ability to move the food around with their tongue or chew in a rotary pattern yet. So that can affect just the whole process of eating.
Okay.
It can be their attention and their level of regulation. We call that sensory. So they can be super upregulated and they can't even sit to eat, or they can be slow and sluggish and need to be upregulated to enjoy eating. So there could be so many issues, a lot of sensory issues around texture, taste. They can smell and taste different from the way that you or I would, and perceive food in a different way. They could be actually not even eating enough food to maintain their weight. They can be not eating, or they can have a very limited number of food choices.
Okay. And so do all children with special needs tend to have a food challenge, or is it just some do and some don't? It depends on the case.
Yeah, I think it depends on the case. That's a really great question, because each child is unique, and there are, maybe they say, 48% of children with autism don't have problems with food.
Okay.
But then the other 52 tend to. That's just rough.
Yeah.
But so there are children that don't have, and then there are children that are just picky eaters. That don't have other problems, and then there are children that have sensory problems, and food and eating can be part of that.
Yeah. Okay. And so how do you discern the difference between this child is just a picky eater, or they have really like peculiar food habits, and there's actually an underlying issue? Like, how do you differentiate between those two if you're a parent?
Yeah, if you're a parent and your child has problems with food, it's a good idea to talk to your physician when you go for a well check and to make that part of the discussion. Because your nutrition affects how your brain grows and develops, and how now they understand a lot more about your immune system that's housed in the gut. So it affects everything about your child's development. So if they aren't eating well, then it's a very good idea to have that discussion first with your physician, and then he'll make the correct referrals to an OT, to a speech and language pathologist to help with more specific problems.
Okay. And so, based on your experience, how difficult are these food challenges on the parents or the caretakers who are responsible for caring for these children with special needs? Like, how have you seen that impact, like their parenting, their mental health, just everything?
Yeah, it can be huge. Just like you were mentioning before, food is part of our rituals, part of our social experience. Mothers naturally want to nurture their children with food. We love with food, and it can be very, very challenging for a family that have a child that won't sit, can't sit, won't won't eat very much, or is very resistive. It can be very challenging to the parent-child relationship, the mother or father's feeling about himself as a parent. It impacts so much.
And so as someone who's, I can imagine that being really hard. And as someone who works in the school with these children, like, how do you navigate those issues? Because obviously, like, they have a home life and there's certain things that they do only at home that they may not do at school. So how do you cope with the food challenges that a child with special needs may have as, like, their teacher?
Well, as an occupational therapist in school, the parent often provides the snack foods that the child's going to eat and the lunch that the child's going to eat, and you can easily learn if it's very restrictive and if they only have the same thing every single day, and if there's a lot of nutrition or not, if they're not eating fruits and vegetables, they're not eating whole grains, they're not good proteins. And then what we can do is we can run groups and individual sessions and cook, prepare food, have the child play with food, interact with food, try food. And also we can discuss with parents, and they can try sending something in every day, and then we can pair it with foods that they already like, and they can try it each day. And it's also nice to have peer modeling, kids that like to eat certain foods sit and eat, and they can see another child eating food and make it part of their life. They can smell it and peel it. Like easy group is Clementine group, where they peel it and smell it, and they can make a little snowman out of it if they like. Okay, so it's almost like you're working with the parents to help the child progress, versus like you're not saying like, oh, we're gonna fix this. It's more like seeing where they're at and trying to work with the parents to develop like a better like eating habits. Right. Exactly. If a child has severe problems, they can go to specific therapists who work on just food issues. And we're working on helping the child in school to be a good student, and that is part of it. But we're also working on their fine motor, which can affect eating. So when you have to do a good evaluation and then figure out what is the problem, and they might not have the motor capacity to turn a spoon and to hold it, or to use a fork, or to they might still be finger feeding, and so then we have to work on their fine motor skills. So
Okay.
there's a lot.
There's a lot of different things. Okay.
You want to find out where the problem is first, do an
Okay.
assessment, and then.
Okay. And so is because like obviously like when like you're a doctor, there's like different specialists. Like there's a doctor who does like ear, nose, and throat. There's a doctor who does allergies. So in the world of OT, is there a way for you to specialize in like food and sensory issues?
Yes.
That,
well,
like,
food in particular.
Food in particular. Okay.
You get advanced training
okay.
in food and speech and language pathologists. A lot of speech and language pathologists and OTs can be experts in that area.
Okay.
And then you can find, and there are also certain clinics and places that you can go with your child that has specific food needs and get treatment just for that.
Just for that. Okay. And so for parents who are watching, or caretakers, or just people who are interested and have people they love who have special needs, what are strategies and parents that they can use to help their children overcome the food challenges that they face? And based on your experience, what you've learned, just everything that you've heard, what are things that they can do to help their children do better?
Okay, yeah, there's lots of things that you can do.
Okay.
And the first thing that I would want to do is the environment. So you want to maybe assess, is your child snacking all day? So they're not hungry when they come to the table.
Okay.
So you want to make sure that you space your meals. Maybe you want 5 small meals or 3, and you want to make sure that the environment is conducive to eating.
Okay.
So a little trick is, first of all, you want them to be hungry, and secondly, you can bake an easy roll or something that you can buy, a quick roll, so that the house smells like bread baking, and it sets the child up to be hungry.
Okay.
And you want a nice environment. You want the child to be seated like we do in school. We want the feet to be flat on the floor and 90 degrees at the ankles, knees and hips, and you want them to have a good position on the table. You don't want it to be too high or too low. And then I suggest no TV or iPad.
Okay.
At the dinner table, so that they're focusing on eating and socializing. And then you want it to be a positive experience. So you want to be reinforcing. You can use I have some stickers if you want.
Yes.
Yeah. And you can use stickers or a nice chart where they can make a check mark for trying new things.
And so they would get a sticker every time they tried something different?
They could.
Okay.
They could, or if you want to reinforce just sitting at the table, if the child's young and gets up and runs around, maybe just, you have to make sure that your expectations are appropriate, but maybe just 5 minutes. You're going to sit at the table and eat with us, with mom and dad, and you might give a sticker for sitting nicely for 5 minutes, or your goal might be to try new food. Then you give the sticker for the new food choice.
Okay.
And with food, it's better to have repeated taste exposure. So
to the same thing, like having them.
Exactly. And I used to always call it in my home a no thank you portion. So I put a tiny little bit on their plate, and if you do it continually, and they just taste, smell, and taste it a little bit. They say a tablespoon per year of their age, but not a whole lot. Like if you want them to learn to like applesauce, just a little bit, and it's better to pair it with the food they like. Let's say they like chicken nuggets, but they don't necessarily like applesauce. It's better, rather than say, your applesauce, then you get your chicken nugget, to pair it together. A little bite of applesauce, a little bite of chicken nugget.
So they begin to associate the applesauce with something that they do.
Yeah, positive.
Like
and it doesn't become a power struggle.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Right.
Yeah.
And then another one is you can food chain. So if a child only likes French fries and you want them to try chicken pot pie, you can expose them to, you make one simple change in the food. So you go from a French fry to maybe a waffle fry to maybe something that's a little bit like dipped in a sauce, or then you can maybe try a chicken nugget and eventually try a mashed potato, and then work to pot pie. So you just change one aspect of the food each time to get from your food they like to a target food.
Yeah, and because you want them to be comfortable, you don't want to feel like you're forcing them to try. You want to feel like you're guiding them along and trying to encourage them along the way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. And we talked about this before off the camera, of course, but you mentioned like how important it could be to have like characters that they like.
Oh, right.
Yes.
Right.
We have SpongeBob here. So why could that be important?
So, especially for children on the spectrum, they often have a superhero or a character that they really like, and you can write them a little story about SpongeBob likes to try new foods, and he likes to eat vegetables, and he likes to help prepare meals with mom and dad, and he likes to sit at the dinner table, and I do too, because I'm just like SpongeBob.
Yeah.
And that can really help a young child, any child.
Yeah.
But it's a technique for helping children, especially on the spectrum. It's called a power card.
Okay, power card. And is this, depending on where they are, is this something that you can make with them, or you would make it and then present it to them?
Making it with them might be a great idea.
Okay.
They could pick their favorite character, and then they could, if they're old enough to write, they could help with the writing and the drawing. And, and it's good if it's in like I like to do this.
Yeah. So it seems like in some ways, like storytelling and like activating their imaginations helps them to like on this journey.
Sure.
Yeah, and it's because you talked about like the social story you were talking about earlier as well, off camera also. But how like to me, like as someone who writes, like that storytelling is powerful, and it's almost like allowing them to like be the main character in their story and feel empowered to like try these different things.
That's a beautiful way to put it, because social stories are evidence-based practice with children with autism, visuals, because they learn visually, and social stories are another thing, and this is a good one that you can maybe get on the internet. And it's called Trying New Foods, and it's a beautiful social story, and it's written from the child's perspective. It's important to eat a variety of foods, and I like to, it uses the first person, and the child and I like to these foods, and I don't like these foods.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. And so when doing all of these activities, how important is it for them to do it with someone that they like trust? Because like, is it that everyone in the house can do this with them, or like they need to have like, if you're trying to get them to try new things, like if they're really close, let's say their dad or like their brother who's older and can help them, like does that help them?
I love this question, because as an occupational therapist, the first thing and the most important step is to develop that rapport and that relationship with the child you're working with. And once you have that, you're golden. And it is a trusting relationship where you've got their back and you care about them and you're fun and they enjoy being with you. And that is so important, the most important aspect. So you're right, like you want it to be fun. Eating is fun, and trying new things can be really fun. And you want to keep, you're right, somebody they trust and love is going to be so much more successful than someone who just comes and eats your vegetables.
Exactly. It may not be as enjoyable for them. And so I guess one of the final questions I have, because this has been really helpful and really informative for me, is what would you say, because this is like, obviously food is a big thing, it can be hard. So like, what would you say to parents who are like really frustrated and like they feel like there's nothing they can do, and they like feel like giving up, even though they don't want to give up on their child? They've tried everything. Like, what type of encouragement would you provide to them?
Keep at it. Keep at it, because children are growing and changing every day. And you can use things like video modeling and stories and songs that have to do with food. This is the way we eat our carrots, and keep it fun and just persist, because it's so important for their health, their well-being, their growth. And I know it's a struggle and it's difficult, but with the right tools and with the right persistence, and keep presenting new things every single day, and have friends in that they like eating it. Just keep trying and take baby steps, and give yourselves a reward when, be easy on yourself too, because it is challenge.
Yeah.
And get help when you need it.
Exactly. And I imagine it may not always be a linear progression. Like you may have like take 2 steps forward and there may be like a setback and then the next day they may take 3 steps forward. Like sometimes it may not be just like they try one food and the next day they're trying everything. Like it takes time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess my final question is there anything else that you would like parents to know, or if there's a particular resource that you find really helpful that you would like to share with them, just like any final concluding thoughts that you have?
Well, I like this. This is a visual picture where they can choose. And I guess I was trying to think if we covered everything. I think we did. The only thing we didn't talk about was texture modification.
Texture. Okay, let's talk about that.
Yes. So if a child won't eat carrots because they don't like the texture of the carrot, you can grate it and put it in soup or stew, or when you're baking, you can add it to your baking because it might be the texture of the food that they don't like in their mouth. Or if they don't like chunky applesauce, you can try pureed applesauce. And if they don't like that cold, you can try it maybe lukewarm.
Okay.
So to play with texture and let the child be part of cooking.
Yes.
That was another thing.
That's important. Yes.
To have the child help prepare food, even if they're, because then they're smelling it, they're touching it, they're interacting with it, and they're developing their fine motor skills.
Yes, doing so many things.
Yes. And socially they're involved. So.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And speaking of cooking, one of the things that I'm going to show you all is if, for example, if you have a child who really loves chocolate chip muffins and you want them to try a healthier version of it, we're going to try adding applesauce and shredded carrots. And so we're going to do that on the next segment. So I hope you stay tuned. But I want to thank you so much for joining me and sharing all of these strategies and tools and tips. I really appreciate it. And it's been really informative for me. And I hope that it's informative to the people who are watching. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes. And so I hope you stay tuned to the next part where we learn how to create a different, healthier version of chocolate chip muffins that your kids may enjoy. Whether they're a child with a special need or they're just a picky eater and you want to try something new for them. So stay tuned for that part. Welcome back. As I said before, I'm here to show you a very special recipe for making chocolate chip muffins, but a little bit healthier. And this recipe is inspired by a beautiful, sweet, amazing kid that both Chan and I know who is on the autism spectrum. And he has a small selection of foods that he will eat. And one of them are these little bite chocolate chip mini muffins. And so I am going to make a recipe that is inspired by that, but has a little bit of a healthier twist. And so what I did is I just found a basic chocolate chip muffin recipe, but I made a few alterations to make it a little bit healthier. And so I'm gonna show you what I did. So in this bowl, I have flour, baking powder, and salt, very standard. And to that, I'm gonna add some sugar. And because the original recipe calls for 3/4 cups of sugar, but I'm actually going to replace the oil in this recipe with applesauce, I wanted to cut down on the sugar content because applesauce, of course, has sugar already in it. So I'm using a reduced amount of sugar, and I'm just gonna add that to the other dry ingredients. And I'm just gonna whisk that together. And we're gonna mix our dry ingredients and our wet ingredients separate. And that's really standard in baking. You wanna mix the dry, make sure that's all integrated. You wanna mix the wet, make sure that's all integrated, and then you mix it all together. And so I'm just gonna do a light mix, nothing too fancy because it's just the dry ingredients and those mix a little bit easier than the wet. And so I'm just gonna set that aside. And now I'm gonna mix the wet ingredients. And so I have some whole milk here. And you could use 2%, you could use almond milk if you want to replace it, but for today we'll just use whole milk. Again, like I said, I'm using applesauce, and this is actually replacing the oil content. And so the recipe calls for a measure of oil, 1/3 cup, I believe. And so I'm replacing it with just regular applesauce, not any flavored kind. You could add flavored applesauce if you want, but because we're trying to keep the flavor simple and make it as close to a regular chocolate chip muffin as possible, I'm just using regular applesauce. And so I'm gonna add all of that. And then I'm going to add some shredded carrot. And so what I did is I just took one small carrot, peeled it, and I used the finest grater possible to get this, it's almost like a pulp, to get this fine shred. And I'm just gonna add it. And the goal here is just to add the nutritious factor that that carrots bring. It's not necessarily to make these carrot muffins, and so you don't have to add a lot, but just enough to get all the nutrients, the wonderful nutrients that carrots provide. And then I'm going to add 1 egg, and then of course some vanilla, because baked goods, almost all the time baked goods need vanilla. Vanilla is the underrated ingredient in almost every baked good. And so I'm just going to whisk this together. You want to make sure it's all integrated, and so you want to use a whisk. And this is a type of dish that you could involve your kids with. You could have them help you grate the carrots. You could have them help you stir this together, because one of the things, as Barbara mentioned, you want to get the kids involved in the process and make them feel like they're a part of the food that they're eating. And this is a really good way to get them involved. And so I'm just going to whisk this all together, something nice and good. And then once that's done, I'm just gonna set that aside. And then I'm just gonna add the wet to the dry, and I'm just gonna whisk it all together. And with these type of muffins, you don't wanna over whisk it. You just wanna whisk it enough till the dough is, to the batter rather, is well integrated. But you don't wanna over mix it, because when you over mix stuff with flour in it, especially when you're doing a baked good like this, when you over mix it, that's how you get a nice, not a nice, but a tough dough. In some cases you want that. When you're making pizza dough, that's why you need it, because you want that chewy texture that we all love about pizza dough. But when you're making a muffin, you don't want a chewy muffin. You want a nice, fluffy, soft muffin. So you don't want to give the gluten that's in the flour, and gluten is what creates that chewiness. You don't want that to happen. And so we're just gonna mix it until it's integrated, and then we're gonna stop mixing it. You do not wanna over mix it. So this looks great. And so what I'm gonna do, the final part, is I'm gonna fold in the chocolate chips. And I just got mini chocolate chips. These are milk chocolate, I believe, but you could use semi-sweet if you want, but I think milk chocolate is a good choice for this. And you're just gonna fold these in. You don't wanna whisk these. You don't wanna risk breaking them up. You just wanna fold them in. And as you could see, this is basically it. It's a very simple recipe. This is not something that takes a long time, but it's something that you can whip up during lunchtime, or when you have a quick 15-minute break. It doesn't take that much time. And so the chocolate chips are all integrated, and now I'm just gonna get ready to put them in the oven. And so I have my mini muffin pan here, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna spray it. And the reason I'm gonna spray it, because I'm not gonna use the little cute little muffin paper tins that I would normally use to make these muffins, because we're trying to get them as close to these little bites as possible. And these little bites don't have the paper muffin cupcake tins, whatever they call those things. And so I don't wanna use that. But if you're just making this just because you wanna make it, maybe because your kids you wanna give your kids something healthy, or you want something healthy and you wanna have, you don't wanna deal with having to spray the pan, then you, by all means, get those little paper tins. But for me, and for what we're doing today, I'm not gonna use that. So this is all integrated. And so I'm just gonna take some spray. You can use your favorite spray. You could use olive oil, you could use, not olive oil, you could use regular oil, whatever you want. But I'm just gonna use the spray because it makes life easier. And then what you're gonna do is you're gonna just take a spoon and you're gonna fill it up about halfway. Because these muffins are small, you don't want to fill it up to the top, because then they get really big. And there's still many, but they're bigger than these. And we want to get them, again, as close to this as possible. So I'm only going to fill it up about halfway. And so it doesn't take much, maybe even it's a really small amount. These are mini muffins. And so look, it only took almost, that's like a half of a spoonful. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill these all up. I'm going to pop them in the oven, and then I'm going to come back and show you how we put it all together and show you the finished product. So stay tuned. So the muffins are out of the oven, and as you can see, I think they look like the actual muffins. I'm gonna compare them in a minute, but I think just based on what I can see now that they're not too far off. And as you can see, there's 2 missing, because my wife and I got a little hungry, and so we wanted to try them. We got a little excited, but so that's basically it. You could just serve them like this. They're nice and hot, fresh out of the oven. You may wanna let them cool a little bit for the kids, but I'm gonna show you what you could do to help your child if they have special needs, or if they're a picky eater and they only will eat food if it's a certain type of way, how you can take this and make it a little bit more familiar to them. And what you would do is you would just take the packet, and I'm gonna actually tear this open and compare them before I show you what I'm gonna do. So this is the muffin that they would normally eat. And then this is the one that has our carrots, it has our applesauce. So there's a difference, but I think it's pretty close. I think it's not too far off. And so I think we could do it. So what I would do is you would just take these muffins and you would empty them all out and you would just replace them with these. But as Barbara was saying, one of the things that you do want to do is you don't want to just force things on your child. You don't want to have like drastic changes. You want to gradually help them overcome the food challenges that they may have. And so what I recommend is actually just keep all of the muffins and maybe just replace one with one of these and see how they react. And maybe they won't eat it. Maybe they'll just touch it and look at it. And that's progress. You should reward that progress and be happy about that progress. And maybe they try it and maybe they just keep eating the rest of them. And then maybe the next time you do 2 of them and then the next time you replace 3 of these muffins with 3 of these muffins. It's about trial and error and understanding what's best for your child. But the thing is, just take your time and know that it's not a one-off process. It takes time, and every child is different. So there may be a child who tries these muffins and loves them, and there may be another child who tries this muffin and knows for sure that it is not the muffin that they're used to, and they will not eat it. And that's okay. You tried it. It's all about trying new things. But that's basically it. You would just take these muffins and maybe replace 1 or 2 of them with these muffins. And they may love it, and they may never know that you put carrots and applesauce in it. So that's it for this episode of Relationship Foods. I hope it was helpful. Again, it's not a linear journey when it comes to kids with special needs and their food challenges. There's high days, there's low days, and there's medium days. But it's all about just keeping at it, keep trying, and know that if you keep at it, that something is bound to work eventually. So I hope you're inspired. I hope it's helpful, and I will see you next time on #RelationshipFoods, and it's coming at ya.